Hi, welcome to Off Script. I'm Zach Lewis.
And I'm Dr. Draper.
Today on the show, we are back from holiday. There wasn't actually a holiday, but we're back to talk about the creator, Gareth Edwards' new film. Is that Gareth Edwards? Edwards.
Yes.
Evans? Edwards.
Edwards.
Gareth Edwards. I had it right. Yes, Gareth Edwards' new sci-fi film is out. We've seen it. I'm excited to talk about it. We're also going to talk about Aftersun, 2022 feature that we missed here on this show. We don't normally miss bold cinema, but it's on Hulu. We're very excited to talk about Aftersun. Stick around for the review. We talk about the news, and the first thing, and also thing we're going to talk about halfway through the show, which is why I'm telling you about it now, is the strikes, the Hollywood strikes, the writer's strike, the actor's strike, SAG-AFTRA, WGA, the AMPTP. We got the details on all of it, but there's a lot of news since we were off last week, so we're going to save it for our middle segment, the Death of Cinema. And before we get to any of that, we need to get to the news on the ground. And the first thing this week, now that we're back, is Disney spending over $270 million to make the Marvels. This is embarrassingly a retraction for Off-Script Film Review, because 2 weeks ago, I got on this very show and told you what everybody else thought on the internet, that The Marvels is the second cheapest movie Marvel's ever made. It was like $170 million or something, and it was like,
130. It was pretty low.
That's not too bad. Boy, Nia DaCosta's really pulled out a budget winner here. I think that might be good stuff. Well, it turns out just a few days after we recorded, like always when it comes to news like this, Forbes reports that, hey, surprise, those numbers are not actually correct. Really, it's cost $270 million and is going to need to make a pretty penny at the box office to clear its costs. Andy, what do you think of the Marvels being the most expensive Marvel movie?
So it was interesting because I heard this number and I was like, to this $270 million, I was like, well, that can't be right. That obvious. Or I was like, that has to include marketing, because we had heard that $130 million number. So you usually kind of double that. And said, okay, that sounds about right for that amount. And then it's like, oh no, that's the budget. And they did get like a $50 million subsidy from the UK government, bringing that down to $220, but still almost $300 million for this movie before marketing. Like, it's going to have to be a huge hit. And it's a little on the short side for Marvel. It's only an hour and 45 minutes. So we're talking like $2 million a minute on this show, and we have not had a lot of faith in this. There has not been a lot of buzz. It looks fine, but you don't make $1 billion on fine. You got to really bring the heat to bring audiences, and they're not going to really have any competition. But I think also people are a little superheroed out. Superhero fatigue is definitely setting in right now, and I think they're going to have a hard time making back this budget.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about superhero fatigue. On paper, this is not that crazy of a decision. It's definitely too much money for what the movie is, I think. And I haven't seen it yet, but I just don't feel like people are that stoked on it because, like you said, superhero fatigue is a real problem. Captain Marvel made $1.1 billion at the box office. $1.1 billion that movie made, with a B. All right, so on paper, it doesn't look that crazy to give its sequel a lot of money, but we're in a very different place, all right? Captain Marvel was the next immediate film after Infinity War, right? Maybe Endgame?
No,
I think
it
was
was
Infinity War.
It was right before one of them.
Everybody was...
Yeah.
It was the middle of, like, Avengers fever. Like, everybody was stoked on it. It was pre-pandemic. Like, it was the golden age of superhero movies, and we're not necessarily in that now. It's not all bad. Guardians of the Galaxy 3 made a killing. All right, like, it's not to say it can't be done. And Nia DaCosta, who we loved for Candyman in 2021, is not, she's no slouch. But we've also seen some kind of concerning reports about the movie, like her saying it's Kevin Feige's film, not hers. Or this, discrepancy where it's like, surprise, the number everybody was reporting was wildly off, and nobody was coming forward and saying, no, this is how much it costs, but here's why we're excited about it. Like, it just feels like maybe they're, putting a ribbon on something that may not be as hot as it should be,
Yes, and I heard an explanation about this. Part of the reason this budget was so high was movies take several years to make, and so this was greenlit back in 2021, and apparently that this is when everyone was spending, because we were still kind of in the pandemic. Streaming was bigger than it is now. The streaming wars were at its height, and so everyone was willing to write big checks for big films. That's also why we got the $235 million Secret Invasion Marvel TV show this summer, and which is an outrageous amount for a TV show, but it was greenlit during this era of big spending. So now it seems ridiculous because all the streamers are clamping down on budgets. So it seems like it doesn't make sense, but it did for 2021 when they were just spending as much as they could. So that's why this happened. And again, the success of the first Captain Marvel, over $1 billion, nothing to shy away from. But again, completely different kind of environment in the culture, pre-pandemic. Marvel, the height of Marvel hype. I think this was the last one before Infinity War.
You might be right.
And so it was nothing but Marvel hype, and so it made sense to greenlight an expensive sequel. But things have changed a lot since then.
Do you remember in July when the finale of Secret Invasion got a 7% on Rotten Tomatoes? Boy, that was a great day. It was a great day on Twitter. It was an amazing day on Twitter.
All anyone did was clown that show.
Dude, Disney is not immune to budget constraints, right? Despite their quite deep war chest. Amazon also has a lot of money, and it turns out they're looking to make some scratch too because they're planning commercial breaks for Prime Video. Surprise! All the streamers figured out that adding ads and making you watch them makes them more money than simply receiving a subscription fee. So Amazon, just like Netflix or Hulu or anybody else who's incorporating ads, has decided that they are going to try to figure out a way to get a little bit more money out of you, the viewer, and your eyeballs and your buying habits. Andy, what do you know about this?
You hate to see it because I think Amazon was one of the last holdouts to add commercials, and they did have those what they call fast channels, which are free advertising supported channels like Freevee, so you could watch some like better movies, but there would be ads in them. And now they're just gonna force the ads into everything. It's a sad time, and but like I said, it's what every kind of streamer is doing.
I think that's really my problem with it, right? Like, I don't want to watch ads. Consumers don't want to watch ads. It's frustrating to me that we're being driven to a place where we're all just going to watch ads again. But at the same time, I also understand it, right? Like, nearly all of these streaming services are operating at a loss. Nearly every one of them is losing money consistently. All the venture capitalists who backed all this stuff half a decade ago are realizing that it's not really working out and they need to make money. So they're squeezing, right? They're upping prices and they're locking down password sharing. And now they're trying to figure out a way to get ads in front of you. And I guess I wouldn't mind so much if I didn't feel like it was coming at the expense of the non-ad free experience, or the ad-free experience, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, because that's what I try to subscribe to, and consistently my subscription costs just keep going up as these things get rolled in, and it's like, man, this is lame. Like, the service was better 2 years ago than it is now. Like, how is it getting worse and we're all paying for more? That's what it feels like. I mean, on the consumer side, to me.
Yeah, exactly. It's getting worse. You have to watch more ads, and if you only subscribe to the ad tier of a service, like with Netflix, like I do, my cheap ass, you can't access all of the Netflix content. If you're on the ad supported tier, you have to be on like the standard or premium tier to get everything that Netflix offers. So that doesn't help either.
Yeah, it's frustrating. And Netflix obviously is not above reproach here. We've got another story just coming out today, believe it or not, the day we're recording this show, on October 3rd. Netflix is planning another price hike as soon as the strike business is over, which, like, they just hiked it not that long ago. So I think people are really surprised at this headline. Like, what do you mean you're going to up the price again? But Netflix is, just like everybody else, they got to make money, I guess. And hosting 3,000 titles in an online library isn't the way to do it, right? They got to do more.
Well, and they're going after the ad supported, the cheap tier. That's what they're going to be raising prices on. So if you're on the premium tier, like Moneybags Lewis, then you your price
who's is that you're talking about? Moneybags.
Then your price probably isn't going to change. But if you're on the cheaper tier, It's probably going to go up by $1 or $2. We don't know the exact amount yet, but this was, like I said, just reported today.
Yeah, it's not exciting. It's a rough time to be a streaming fan, folks, but bear with us. We'll all get through it together. A bit of a lighter story, which I'm excited to talk about from the awards category, something we don't often get to talk about on this show. The Golden Globes are adding 2 new categories this year to their awards ceremony: blockbuster movies and stand-up comics, which I don't think is meant to be as funny as it is, but boy, it's probably the funniest Globes headline I've read in a hot minute. What do you know about this, Andy?
So this is, I think, a good thing and kind of a side-eye thing. Adding a category for stand-up special, I think is a really good thing because stand-up is its own kind of form of entertainment, and there's not really a good way to recognize that. So I think that that's a great step. The blockbuster category, this reminds me, the Academy Awards tried to do this a couple of years ago with their, Oscar for Achievement in Popular Film, because they wanted a way to recognize, movies that make a ton of money, but while also recognizing high art films as well. And so this is the Golden Globes attempting to do the same thing. They're going about it probably a better way instead of saying it's the award for popular film. It's more money based, but it's still kind of the same thing because there's going to be the one who wins blockbuster movie and then the one who wins best picture.
You'd think in like declining physical media sales over the years and the rise in streaming that like these companies wouldn't care so much about getting, the stamp of approval from an awards service on the front of their DVD, right? They shouldn't have to worry about being nominated for 3 Oscars or having a winner of 2 Golden Globes on the front of like some hot new musical, because like it's probably going to Netflix and that's not going to be on the thumbnail, right? Who's going to notice? But that seems to be the exact opposite of what's going on, because people care a lot about winning this stuff, and they should, right? Like it's an honor to be nominated, it's an honor to be awarded. But the Golden Globes like is in this funny space where they're like desperately trying to get people to watch in a time when like award ceremony views are just continuing to tumble despite exciting events that may happen at the ceremony, like Will Smith and Chris Rock getting into it. But I think adding like box office achievements a laugh, just because like it's hard to deny you wouldn't just give it to the highest earner, right? Like that was the problem the Oscars had. People were like, okay, so just the movie that makes the most money gets that, right? Well, not necessarily, right? It's still got to be an exciting category. I think you're right on stand-ups. It is a little funny because it feels so far removed from traditional film as we would understand it at the Globes. But like you also make a good point. There's a lot of work that goes into those things, and putting together a stand-up special is a lot harder than it appears. You'd be surprised at, by the way, some of the directors are people who guest direct stand-up specials, like celebrities who will jump in and direct some comedian stand-up special. You'd be surprised. So I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. I do appreciate them trying to get some more attention, right? Like trying to draw a little bit more eyes on the Golden Globes, and hopefully they'll help them out. One more story this week from the box office. Wow, I thought the last week was the last episode. The last story was the funniest story of the episode. Paw Patrol scares off Saw X and the creator with a $23 million opening. Paw Patrol, the biggest movie of the week. Andy, don't you know about this? Of course.
Oh gosh, this is kind of embarrassing. This is not because of how good Paw Patrol is, as much as you couldn't get. That just means you couldn't get people out to other films. And, a kid's movie is always just like, if parents are looking for something to do, it doesn't matter what the kid's movie is. If there's a kid's movie to see, they're going to go out and see it. And so that's kind of what's happened here. Saw came in at about 18 million, which is good. It's actually done better than the previous 2 Saw movies. It's off to a good start. It's probably going to maybe reinvigorate the brand. But still to come in under a kid's movie, a family movie, not great. Same with the creator that just barely made 16 million over the weekend, and that was an expensive one, $80 million budget. So that's going to be tough to make back. At least Saw was a cheap movie. I think it was made on an $20 million budget, so they're already doing well. But man, it's going to be tough for the creator, and just it's embarrassing when like the kids movie that parents just go to regardless of quality, beats everything else.
Well, yeah, man. So there's a couple of things here. Number one, I'm gonna go work my way backwards up the list because the creator came out at the bottom, which is a bummer. Creator, another, and we're gonna talk about it in a second, but another fine example of high concept sci-fi that American audiences just do not turn out for. Right, like Blade Runner 2049 is my favorite one to point to. Brilliant film, nobody came. Like it's just the way it goes, and it's a bummer. And I think Gareth Edwards does good work, and I hope he stays in this space. Like I said, we'll talk about the creator more in a second. Regarding Saw X, man, I don't. First, real quick, that movie probably should have come out closer to Halloween. They always had the tagline, "If it's Halloween, it must be Saw," which is silly, but like very beginning of October shows a lack of confidence because you don't think it'll hold up to other like Blumhouse horrors coming out, namely Five Nights at Freddy's, and that's silly. Because Saw X is a completely different beast, right? It's R-rated, it's hardcore. Like you're chasing like torture gore and also like camp fans at that point. Five Nights is a different. They're not even the same, but regardless, as for Paw Patrol, like it's just a laugh, right? It's just funny because I did not have Paw Patrol on my radar. I don't know anything about Paw Patrol. Seeing it come out and dominate two other films that I would have been mildly interested in is really funny. And most importantly, Saw and Paw Patrol are both under $30 million to make, and both have blown past what they need. And like, once again, you don't have to have a mega budget to make a mega bucks. Like, boy, I don't know why we got to talk about Marvel spending $240 million when these movies are putting out just a fraction of that.
And in fact, it's just easier to succeed when your budget is just much more reasonable. Also, Paw Patrol is just propaganda for the record. But
it's true. Certified oh man, certified propaganda.
But they've already greenlit a third one. They're gonna do a third one because this is actually the second film in this series. The first one was also very successful. So there's gonna be a third one in a couple of years. Also made on a $30 million budget. So yeah, I don't know why everyone feels you got to spend so much money, and it's there's only so many big blockbuster weekends you can have to make all that back.
One more note on this before I move off it, because I don't know if I'll get the chance to talk about it again. I don't want to go see Saw X, and I've seen the Rotten Tomato scores and I've seen the hype. I just feel like I'm like too old, dude. Like I have seen a bunch of those movies and I was really into them for a long time. And I was like, dude, the Saw movies are cool. People don't get it. It's bold cinema. And like, I hear this next one's rad and they're going to make Saw 11 and they love the success. And that's very exciting. I don't know, man. I feel like I'm weary this year. 2023 got me down bad and I just don't want to go watch people get tortured for 90 minutes. Like I'm just not into it. I don't know. And I know you kind of feel the same way. So I wanted to just talk about it a second before we move off it in case somebody's like, why didn't they cover Saw on the podcast? Like, no, I feel like any other year I would, but like, I don't know, man. I'm not feeling the spirit.
We did review the previous Saw film, which is called Spiral from the Book of Saw. Or at least Zach reviewed it because my movie cut out like 45 minutes in, like the screen went black and they never fixed it.
Yeah. And you refused to go back for another showtime.
Yeah, my time was limited that weekend, and so I was not able. So I reviewed the first 45 minutes where nothing really happened. It was pretty boring.
You were catching the last screening just before we recorded, and you were like, "No, I don't have time to watch another one. It's fine."
Yeah. I remember thinking it was a very artistic thing that was happening. And I was like, oh, the screen's completely black. We're just listening to the audio. Have to imagine the torture. And then it's like, no, the screen just went out and you're an idiot.
Isn't that great? For a minute, you were like, dude, this is amazing. Yeah, like this is bold cinema, Paul Schrader stuff. Yeah, right. No, not the case. Anyway, we should move on. I'm very excited to talk about this first film. Andy's going to take the summary on it. A bit complex, but I think he's got it. I got confidence in him. Andy, please take it away.
The creator. So this is a big new sci-fi film from director Gareth Edwards, who previously did Star Wars, or Rogue One, a Star Wars story, the troubled yet very successful production of back in 2018. Or so, I can't even remember, but he hasn't done a film for a while. This is his big new sci-fi film. It takes place
Also,
in the
oh, sorry, not to cut you off, but also worth mentioning, he only did like the first cut of that, and then Disney hired Ron Howard to reshoot like chunks of it and finish it. But his name's on it. But like, I don't know that was perfectly representative of him. But yes, that was his last big thing.
right.
Yeah.
So in the creator, it takes place in the future where there is this kind of cold war between humans and robots. Robots have been outlawed by the Western world because there's this big nuclear attack that they kind of think that the robots are responsible for. But they do exist in the country of New South Asia, which is kind of a combination of like China, Thailand, present day Vietnam, and it's it's a new country, new lines have been drawn. The West is still waging a war on these countries. It's very much a parallel to like Vietnam, the Vietnam War, or the wars in Iraq, Afghanistan. There's a lot of parallels to that. That's our setting, but our protagonist is John David Washington, who plays Joshua. He's a former soldier who's conscripted to find some super AI weapon that's being developed, and he doesn't want to go initially, but there's some evidence that maybe his long lost wife that we thought was dead, but actually may not be, that she may still be alive. So that kind of motivates him to suit up and go back into the fray to find this, whatever this AI is, which turns out to be a child, we know, because the trailer gives away pretty much the whole movie. And then also hunt for his missing wife. We meet other interesting characters like Ken Watanabe's character, who's like what they call simulants, half robot, kind of half human. We also have Western military forces played by Allison Janney in kind of a strange role. But that's our setup. There's a lot going on. It's a little complicated. It's a really interesting world. Zach, what'd you think?
So I think you can't talk about the creator without talking about the visuals, which is why I'm glad you kind of opened with that. Visually, this movie is stunning. It is genuinely stunning. Gareth Edwards has an eye for science fiction presentation that few others have. It is like Villeneuve-esque in the look of some of his scale and scope of these cities and giant ships and machines and robots. That stuff is amazing. Unfortunately, the script for Creator is a little loose and it's a little lacking. And for a 2-hour, 15-minute feature, you might end up feeling a little bored in Act 2, or maybe even surprised by where Act 3 goes, for better or worse. I like the Creator, actually. I don't love it though, and it's a shame because it's a movie that I think, like almost like Tenet, which is fitting for John David Washington. It's like more about vibes than it is about like actually paying attention. Because the vibe of Creator is great. Just look at the trailer if you're watching the live stream. Like, just check us. Look at what we've got up here. Like, it's so cool looking. Like this mix of practical and CGI and like on the ground handycam work. Like that stuff works so good, but the actual movie, the plot in the middle of it's just a little weak, and it bums me out. But I'm excited to talk about it. I know not everybody feels this way. Let's get into it. What's the best place to get going?
I want to start with the positives, and let's start with the visuals, because the movie does look absolutely stunning. We have these landscapes, and they shot a lot on location. Like they're in places for stand-ins for like Vietnam or South Asia, but there's these incredible massive structures. Like there's this big military thing called Nomad that's like it's like the International Space Station, but even more enormous, and it just kind of scans the earth, and it has this big scan that you can see all the way covering landscapes. And then you have big things like that, a lot of military style robot stuff, but then you have the much smaller details of what they call the simulants, the human robot hybrids, which a lot of times are just like someone's memory, like cloned into this robot. And then they have robots that are 100% robot, but that are still very human, behave very human. The AI is in this world used to do policing or do kind of manual labor jobs. So there's a lot in that role. So I thought the visuals are really stunning.
Yeah, one of the most interesting things about the kind of sentient robots that are roaming is you'll either have you've got a lot of different models, right? As humanity has kind of built these up. Takes place in 2065, so not too far distant future. And you've got everything from like basic maintenance bots that are like roaming the street and cleaning, whatever, street sweeping, like something out of Blade Runner, to like soldier or like police officer bots that are like a lot leaner and taller and have these like flat dome heads. You got like server bots, right, that are out gardening or landscaping. And then you've got your simulants, which are like your halfway step. You've seen these in the trailer. They're the like normal face, but like with a see-through like back end where there would be ears. It's just like a big hole through with like gears whirring in there. And those I think are most interesting because those characters, the simulants in the film, help bridge the gap between humans and robots, which is a very central theme in the creator, right? Like, what is it to have life? What does it mean to have meaning? A very commonly explored sci-fi trope, I think, but one worth looking at, especially in a film as pretty as this one. The simulants really draw your eye because you end up looking at a lot of characters and wondering, is that a real person or not? And often it doesn't make a difference. That's part of what the creator is trying to kind of get at, believe it or not. It's it's a message of like, what does it mean to exist? And is it the same for a robot as it is for a human? Do androids dream of electric sheep? And having these characters that basically functionally are completely human and then just have this kind of short part CGI'd out in the back helps to bridge that gap between like what is mechanical and what isn't. You get some characters who you're not sure. You get some characters who, like, when they turn their head, you're like surprised. You can get multiples, right? Because you've got only so many models of simulants, so you might see two of the same one. Like, that stuff is really neat. And also, like, it's assisted by John David Washington's character being an amputee. He's missing an arm and a leg, and his leg is fully robotic and his arm is too, but you can only tell, like, the rest of the arm is like flesh, almost like the Terminator, right? Like, it's like wrapped in flesh and skin and whatever.
Like prosthetic, but yeah.
So yeah, like, so for most of the film, like, it's just John David Washington shooting his arm, and they just did like a little touch up with some CGI to go back and cover like the top half of his shoulder. Like, comes off looking great, feels very practical, feels very grounded. All of that's super effective. Like, that's likely the best parts of the film, I think.
Right. I think another highlight are the action scenes. We have a lot of, we have shootouts between like robots versus robots, robots versus humans, humans versus humans. We get some futuristic cars. We have a kind of big battle, like there's battle tanks, or like the one person has kind of a mech suit that has missiles on it. So you have some of this futuristic battle scenes as well. At one point, there's kind of this giant land tank thing. It's like the size of a building, big kind of battle with that. So the action scenes, I think, are also really good. There's a little bit, sometimes they go on a little bit too long, but that part is really well produced.
It's true. And Edwards uses landscape really well, like, to tell stories visually out on the battlefield, which is neat. There's this great sequence towards the end where he's got all these rebels holding out on this kind of like island fortress, and he's got this really long, narrow wooden bridge like running to the city where like all the police are coming in to attack them, and they shoot all this smoke out, and you've got all this smoke blowing over this like wood. It looks like something out of a Kurosawa movie. Like, it's so thoughtful. I think where the creator starts to suffer, believe it or not, where its action and landscape and visuals are fantastic, is it's things like verbal exposition, which it suffers a lot of. A lot of like big turn moments in the creator where like there will be a big plot change or you'll discover a piece of information are like literally just told from one character to another. They just say it. And it feels so flat because so much of the movie is visual. Like, you learn about the world and how robots interact in it and how simulants are there through action and through expression, like visually, of what characters are doing. So when Joshua like finds out this key piece of information about where his wife may be, or even if she's still alive, when that's just kind of like told to him flatly, and then he like hops in a car and drives to the next scene, it feels really weak. And it's a shame because it doesn't always do that, but like, it just feels like a lot of its core plot points like are just told flat out in dialogue. And it's like, I miss that bold cinema. I miss that Denis Villeneuve, like Ryan Gosling thinking he might be a replicant human hybrid like thing in a dream sequence where like there's no dialogue at all and you just get all of it through tone. It's lacking a little here, and I think Edwards can get it. I don't know. I think he needs a little bit more confidence in what's in the script, because he helped write it. He wrote it with Chris. I don't remember his name. I'll check it out on IMDb.
Chris Weitz.
Chris Weitz, yes.
Right, and that's where my criticisms start, is with our plot and characters, which are a major part of any movie. But luckily, all the kind of visual elements do a lot of the heavy lifting to keep you from kind of rolling your eyes. But yeah, our characters are again a little weak, a little one-dimensional. John David Washington is the weary soldier. His wife is essentially fridged, meaning that his significant other is, hurt, and that motivates him kind of to action. His wife is named Maya, played by the great Gemma Chan, who I had no idea was in this. I had no idea she was in this movie. She's in a couple of Marvel movies. She's in Crazy Rich Asians.
Love Gemma Chan.
Fabulous. I had no idea if she was in this, and I've seen this trailer like 5 or 6 times in the theater. Like, I don't know how I didn't that. Like, she's not very well advertised in this. Her role is kind of small and is largely seen in flashbacks. She doesn't get enough screen time, and then we also have our kind of young, our super weapon / kind of a messianic figure. Called Alfie, played by a young girl named Madeline Una Voiles. Again, it's a sweet kid who, is like, oh, this is the great weapon, the great destructor. They don't do a good job of saying like really what she can do. She appears to kind of have remote powers, which really just kind of turn stuff off, but that needed to be way more interesting. She needed to, be a hyper intelligence that could, outthink and outdo humans and something. But it's really one dimensional. It's not very interesting to watch. And then we're hit with a number of like tropes and kind of just sci-fi tropes. You got the weary soldier, the dead wife, the messianic child that will save us all, the kind of like Avatar level angry military personnel. So it's a lot of kind of paint by number stuff.
Yeah, and like I don't mean to agree that it's paint by numbers, but like in this odd way, as you watch it, you start to realize that like a lot of the more interesting elements of the creator start to just fall into place of where you think it'll go in your head, and then it satisfyingly arrives there. For most of this movie, I actually thought it was a lot like Apocalypse Now or Heart of Darkness, right? It's Joshua's journey with Alfie to find this kind of I don't know, this idea of this kind of like savior of robot kind, right? That may be able to turn the tide and change things forever. They're like deep in the jungle, right? They're traveling from like these cities to cities, and they're evading danger and police and other insurgents, and like all of this like is just slowly getting worn down, and all of it in this like beautiful like landscape, like this wonderful kind of new Asia that's been built here on screen for us to enjoy. Like, that's all really great. I was so taken aback by where Act 3 goes, and that doesn't really happen in these movies. Yeah. And I like, and maybe that's a really satisfying surprise. But when you watch Creator, I would love to chat with you, the listener, about what you think, because we don't do spoilers here on this show. But I couldn't, like, I kept thinking, I was like, well, this isn't going where I think it's going. And for better or worse, it does. And I think in that way, I think Creator is trying to satisfy two masters. Honestly, if I didn't know any better, I'd say there's like a 4-hour cut of Creator out there. And the studio was like, absolutely not. You have to cut this down. And so they just tried to fill in a lot of gaps with like ADR and dialogue. And that's why you end up with these kind of really quick scenes where like somebody will just tell Joshua what to do next, and he just goes and does it. And I told Christine when I got home from watching it, I was like, it reminds me of like a 6-year-old telling you a story, and they just keep saying, and then. Like, so he runs up to this, and then he gets on the shuttle, and then he goes to the space station, and then he fights the robots, and I'm just like, oh my God. Like, it just turns into this like breakneck run to the end. That's really unsatisfying. Like, for a movie that is slow, admittedly, in its first, hour 45, but is thoughtful. And I figured, this is kind of the intended experience, so that the end's surprisingly jarring.
Yeah, I agree. And Zach and I have not talked about this yet, but I felt the same way. Act 3 is so rushed. And the first two acts have good pacing, I think, and really take their time. And you spend most of your time in like New South Asia, and then you hit Act 3 and you go to like three different locations, vastly different locations out of nowhere, and it's like speed running at the end, and it's like you probably should have cut like one of these sequences and just had this wrap up a lot cleaner. It just it's like you needed a few more drafts at the script to really kind of tighten it up. But yeah, man, it's really jarring after two acts of kind of more slower paced, thoughtful filmmaking, and then all of a sudden it's just like bam, 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 bam.
Yeah. That being said, like, I think somebody going through with a red pen is a soft critique of an otherwise pretty good film. And there's a lot in Creator that works. There really is. Like, it is not a bad feature by any means. I think it's going to have its audience. Like, I think there are going to be sci-fi fans that are really dedicated to it, in part because the world is just so rich. Like, I can't get over how good the world is in the Creator. The world building's excellent in the Creator. But it's just kind of actual plot. It's just a little loose, a little lacking. And that's, again, a simple critique. That's a simple criticism for an otherwise a movie that works so well. There are so many directors who would flub this whole thing start to finish. Gareth Edwards rolls out of Rogue One, takes the L, right? Ron Howard finishes that movie for him, and he puts this together, and it is not a bad feature. The problem is, I know it's difficult to get high concept sci-fi greenlit, right? Villeneuve infamously said after Blade Runner 2049 was a bomb, he was never making one of these again. And then Warner Brothers told him they'd give him Dune, and here we are, which is amazing. Like, but I mean, he was like right on the edge of like, I'm out. Like I can't do these movies, you know. Like there's too much that goes into it. You pour too much in, and I think Edwards maybe just poured in a little too much, and that's so okay. That's so all right. Like I think the creator is really cool. I'm excited to see what he does next, I think. How about you, Andy?
Yeah, no, that's kind of how I feel about it. Like he's definitely has a great eye for visual effects and for world building. The world building in this is really good. Like I said, there's a lot of parallels and criticisms of basically the wars in Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and of generally of Western warfare in general. It's very on the nose about that. It had so much promise. I think several more drafts of the script, and it could have had something really special.
Yeah, like it reminds me of like Spielberg taking a swing at like artificial intelligence, or even like a Neil Blomkamp film, right? Like very District 9, very like on the ground, grimy, grungy robot stuff. Like that, I think is, I don't know. I think it's neat. It's got something to it in a time when we're just constantly surrounded by technology. That being said, Andy, would you recommend The Creator?
I would actually. It's grown on me a little bit. It definitely has some issues in plot and character, but I think that's really made up by really stunning visuals and world building. And again, it's got hints of Blade Runner, of Dune, of Apocalypse Now. Like you said, it's really it's kind of a visual feast, and I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. It's not perfect, and if you're a little skeptical, I would say save it for streaming, but I think it's worth checking out.
I'm in the same boat. I think it's not a bad time. I would say, and this is a bit of a disappointment, but hear me out. The visuals are great. They're really fantastic. You do not need to spend money on a premium screen to go see this. I blew the extra cash and went and saw it on like a Dolby screen. Not worth it. Like the action is not that earth shattering that you will be whisked away to a land far away in your experience. Like it's definitely just an expensive screen for this one. That being said, like it's a really pretty film. I think it's really cool. I don't know what streaming service it'll be coming to, but when it comes out, you should go check it out there. Not a bad time. And if you feel differently, by the way, like please let us know. Like, good God, we're not the purveyors of what works in cinema. Like, if you think the third act of Creator is rock solid, like I'd love to have that conversation because unfortunately, right now, I don't know anybody else that's seen this movie other than Andy and I, who are, you know, pretty aligned on how we feel about it. So keep me posted and write into mail@oscarfilmreview.com to keep up with, us and what you think of The Creator. That being said, we should talk about our next segment. Very excited to talk about this. It's been a minute, but we're going to give you the meat and potatoes. Andy, what do we call this?
It's time for the death of cinema. In fact, this actually might be the life of cinema this week, the end of the writer's strike. After nearly 5 months, I think, a deal was finally reached and agreed to between the studios and the Writers Guild. The actors are still on strike, but they're in talks, and that's probably going to be coming to an end fairly soon. There's a lot of details, and we're going to try not to get caught in the weeds too much, but kind of the overview is that there were big concessions made in terms of AI, of staffing minimum, of just getting paid more for a lot of the work, and also things like residuals for streaming. So that's were three of the really big wins, and we're going to get into that a little bit more. Zach, what are your initial thoughts?
So this is a historic thing, and it may not feel historic because it's immediate and we get a lot of news and it's been going for a while, but unions don't get a lot of big W's in this country right now. They're getting more, I should say, over time, but for the writers to stick it out for 5 long, arduous, hot summer months and picket every day until they got what they wanted is incredible. The AMPTP, the American Association of Motion Picture Theater Providers, whatever, the 5 big studios, they weren't budging. Like, they very early came to the writers and said, here's our deal, it's the best we got. And the writers said, that's not even close to good enough. And for months, anytime they met, same song and dance. Even as far as about a month ago, when the 5 big CEOs all came to the meeting and said, it's not getting any better. They literally had their leadership try to pitch them and say, this is the best deal you're getting. And the writers all stuck it out and said, no, we're not doing it. We know we can do better. This system's outdated. Nielsen ratings are a silly way to try to track how many views Netflix is getting. People are watching Suits over there all the time, and nobody on that show is getting any residuals. Something's got to change. And it did. It has. It's changed. Things have happened. Things have moved forward. Now SAG is working their way towards a deal. I just saw some news that Disney's VFX artists are voting to unionize, so you're probably going to hear more from us next week about that. This is a big deal. It's a big deal for everybody. It's good for the film goers, right? It's good for us who watch movies. It's good for people who make movies. I see it as an all-around win. I have trouble seeing this as a bad thing. What are some of these terms, Andy? Like, what exactly is it they won?
So we're going to get into the weeds here a little bit. This is just a 3-year contract, which they'll revisit in 2025, 2026. One of the big increases are increase in minimums for writers, both TV and film. And this is part of what's complicated, is that there's so many different types of writing jobs. Increases to health and pension contributions, and for writing teams. I wanted to get into some of these increases. So, for instance, if you write a screenplay, some of the minimums for getting buying your screenplay is increased by 200%. And what that means in real numbers is a lot of times an initial draft can be bought for between 40 and 80,000, depending on the certain level of script. So all those numbers have doubled. So that's a huge bonus for that. Other things with just accelerated payments, so writers will be paid sooner for their work instead of having to wait so long. And one of the big things is streaming residuals. And one of the ways that that's going to change is that, for instance, if a streaming film or show is made on a $30 million budget or more, minimum initial compensation is now $100,000, which is a 20% increase from before. There's also just combined residuals for foreign markets. And a big thing that the studios are going to be forced to be transparent with the numbers of who's actually watching this. That will not be shared with the public. It will only be shared with the Writers Guild under NDA. I'm sure those will get leaked at some point. But that part is a huge deal. Making the studios show what the streaming numbers really are, and then forcing pay based on that. Viewership based streaming bonus is what it's called.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, the way this has been working up till now is Nielsen, the company that was responsible for tracking ads on basically like the 4 major television networks 70 years ago, has functionally been adapted and brought up over time to accommodate for not only broadcast television, but cable television, satellite, They cover radio, and since the last decade that we've been really getting into streaming, they've been trying to handle that too, and that has not been going great. It's been okay, but it hasn't been enough, especially to cover the smaller people like the writers who are usually pushed to the back, right? Like movie companies think of, okay, who do we need to put our money into here? And it's going to be your star power, and it's going to be your marketing, right? And your CGI. My God, the CGI is the biggest thing ever. Writers are consistently getting pushed to the back, and that doesn't work because you can look at a lot of these productions and realize that, hey, these don't really work without writers. They're functionally as important as your actors. You have to have a voice for these people to say things into the camera with, and that comes from your writers. So there's really not a lot around it. One of the things I did think was interesting in here was their mention of using AI, because I know that was a bit of a thing. Andy, did you talk about that at all? I didn't hear you mention it, but I want to make sure I don't. Yeah.
Not yet. I wanted you to talk about the pay increases before we got into that.
Well, tell us about pay increases, because I wish I was as read on that as I am on the AI bit.
Well, that's kind of what we just went over. Just increase in minimums for a lot of it. Increases
over 200% for screenplays. Yeah.
Yeah, just a lot of increases in general, and a pretty sizable amount, like sometimes 30 to 50%. So that's a big win. As far as AI goes, a lot of crucial things, and I'm going to read this word for word. AI can't write or rewrite literary material, and AI-generated material will not be considered source material under the NBA, meaning the AI-generated material can't be used to undermine a writer's credit or separated rights. So the studios can't use AI on a script and then say, well, the writer didn't write it, AI wrote it, so we don't have to pay you. So that's a huge win. A writer can choose to use AI while performing writing services if the company consents and provided that writer follows ethical company policies. The company can't require the writer to use AI software when performing writing services. So the company can't say, you got to use ChatGPT to write this and then pay you less because you use that. The companies have to disclose whether a writer is given material that was written by AI. WGA reserves the right to assert the exploitation of writers' material to train AI. So you can't, take all of Stephen King's scripts or whatever and use it to feed an AI, something like that. The AI not being able to write or rewrite literary material and count as original works is pretty huge. So those are kind of the 4 big bullet points.
Yeah, and I had heard one of the big concerns, like from writers on the ground in LA. They said that really for AI, what they're concerned about is studios will use AI to generate basically a source script and then have a writer edit it. That's the deal. Like, we'll just take this script that we had ChatGPT kick out and just massage it into a movie, and we'll pay you, a quarter of what we would have paid. And we're only hiring 1 of you and not 3 of you. Like which obviously is a big concern, right? Like also, not being able to import a writer's material to just crank out more like them. I was listening to, God, who was it? Sarah Silverman was complaining just the other day. She was like, somebody uploaded my audiobook and a bunch of my stand-up specials, and you can make me say whatever you want on the internet. It's disgusting and horrible. I was like, yeah, that kind of is disgusting and horrible, Sarah Silverman. You're right. So, I mean, overall a good thing. I think overall this is all good stuff. I hope SAG-AFTRA gets the next best thing, and then I hope that Disney's VFX union, God willing, if that turns into a big story, I hope they get what they're looking for, because Lord knows they need it. Overall, I think all good things. I think it's incredible they got what they were looking for, and they reached the finish line. 5 months of no work, going out and picketing. That is insane. I couldn't do it. I don't know how they had the stamina. I don't know how they had fortitude. I don't know how they could afford rent. I guess they couldn't afford rent.
What? One of the things that I heard early on was, being a paid writer it's a shaky gig as it is, and so most of those people, they're used to sometimes not having work, so they were ready to be in the trenches because they've already been in the trenches, and that's not something I think the AMTP was ready for.
Yeah, I think you're right. Overall, good things. Like I said, keep it here on Off Script for more from the strikes. If something changes with SAG, I think they're meeting tomorrow. You'll hear about it when we do the show next week, and we'll follow up with you. This stuff's important. All right, it's no joke. It's a big deal. And speaking of big deals, we got one more movie to talk about this week on the podcast. I'm going to be taking the summary on this one, and I'm excited to get into it. This film came out in 2022 from director Charlotte Wells, who's not done really anything large. I mean, small indie film, micro budget. It's on Hulu. We missed it when it came out, but it caught a ton of buzz last year, late when it came out. So I'm excited to talk about it. The movie is Aftersun. So Aftersun is the story of Sophie and Callum, a daughter and father who are on vacation, or at least in this kind of flashback. It turns out the whole movie is set in the present, and Sophie, adult Sophie, is reflecting on her life. This vacation she took with her father, Callum, played brilliantly by Paul Mescal. God, I don't know where I was going with that. Yes, Paul Mescal.
King
Sophie,
of indie cinema right now.
Yeah, he's a big deal. He got Gladiator 2 off this movie. So yeah, he's no joke. He's coming out with Foe. Saoirse Ronan's in that. That's going to be out soon. Frankie Corio plays Sophie, young Sophie. The two of them, she's about 9, 10 in this movie. The two of them go to Turkey. Mm-hmm. They're both from Scotland. They have cute accents, and they're just staying in a hotel room, and they're enjoying like a week away, right down by the pool, getting some sun, maybe hanging out with some of the older people, like the older kids at the resort, and just kind of enjoying the time away. And that's 95% of Aftersun, believe it or not. Like that is nearly all of the film. It's stunning how subtle it is, because it's a movie about the things that aren't said. It's a movie about the things you don't see. And that sounds like a challenging thing to understand, and it is. So we don't do spoilers on this show, but before I ask Andy what he thinks and we start to get into it, I do want to say this disclaimer. If you are curious about Aftersun, I don't know if there's anything Andy and I can say to say like what you might want to experience with it. So maybe you should go watch it and come back. Like I said, we're not spoiling anything, but I think it's kind of a special movie, and it's surprisingly intimate, and it's surprisingly sincere. So with that, I just want to throw that on the front. Andy, what did you think of Aftersun?
So I was really suspect going into this, or skeptical rather. Tons of buzz last year, tons of Oscar buzz. Paul Mescal was nominated for Best Lead Actor for this movie. And I was strangely turned off by all of that buzz, because you hear that about every Oscar-worthy film around Oscar season in the fall. Everything is like the greatest thing with the greatest performance, and it's gonna win all the Oscars. And a lot of times, that's not true at all. A lot of times it's just kind of a chore. I've even heard that about films coming out this year. About a month ago they were hot. Now they're like, oh, people are like, well, what's kind of the big deal? And Aftersun was one of those movies I just was not really excited to see. It kind of looked like a bit of a chore. And I was really blown away for it in a way I completely didn't expect. It reminded me a lot of like The Lost Daughter, which is not a film I particularly enjoyed, and I thought it would be a little bit like that. But it really is something different. It's a very, on the surface, simple coming-of-age tale of young Sophie remembering this vacation with her father. But we learn a lot about both people and their situation along the way, and flashes into adult Sophie's life, which really tells so much. And this is really what bold cinema is about, because so much of the emotion and meaning of the film is told visually through a very simple story. Like I said, it's a girl and her father on vacation in Turkey for a week. It's not, and it avoids a lot of pitfalls. It doesn't have like big speeches, big monologues, big ugly cry moment, or these kinds of things you kind of expect from movies like this. It's so profound and skips a lot of kind of Oscar baity stereotypes.
Yeah, there's about, I'm gonna say maybe like 8 minutes of footage in like this 90-minute movie. It's quick. That if you were to cut it out like with a razor and just play the movie back, you'd have no idea there's like subtext. And that's what this movie's about. It's subtext. It's about Sophie reflecting on her life and trying to understand the man that was her father based on what she saw and kind of knew of him at a young age. Because it becomes obvious as you're watching Aftersun that like something is wrong with Callum. Something is not right with him, but you can't figure it out. And you, the audience member, an adult, are very much trying to seek that answer, right? He's almost like your protagonist. He's her dad. He's the one other person at this resort that they know. They're there with nobody else. They have no family friends. It is just the two of them. So naturally, you want to get to understand them. And you start to find out over the course of the picture that, okay, him and his mother divorced. He doesn't live in Scotland. He's working on a project at home in London, I think is where he has a broken wrist, which already is, you're thinking in your head, okay, what happened there? Like, you want to know the story. And Aftersun is kind of this brilliant exercise in not really giving you the answer, giving you breadcrumbs and saying, hey, you kind of draw your own conclusions of what you think this might be. And then before you know, whisking you back to Sophie in modern time and seeing that she is struggling with the exact same questions you are struggling with. And in that way, Aftersun forges a connection between its character and its audience that, like, very few films do. Very few films from a first time feature director, Charlotte Wells, which is incredible, in 90 minutes on no money. Like, it's bananas how well this is put together. I don't even know how they storyboarded certain parts of it. We were talking about when we were watching. I was like, I don't even know how it came together in post. Like, it's baffling. It's lightning in a bottle. Like, I don't know how they did it.
Yeah, it doesn't feel acted most of the time. It's like you're watching real people. It feels just so kind of calm and natural. Plot wise, we know we get small insights into Callum's life. He's doing his best to be a good father. In this weekend, he's paid for this, this weekend or this week-long trip in a resort in Turkey. He's always around Sophie. He's making sure she's got, sunblock on. That's that kind of thing. He's a really good father on the surface, but then we also kind of learn a lot about him that's under the surface, that he doesn't have a very good job or doesn't have a stable job, doesn't really have a lot of money. He's not around a lot. He seems to kind of drink a lot. He tells his daughter not to smoke, but he smokes, in kind of private. But he is doing his best, and he's on this great vacation. He's at Sophie's side constantly. He's not just like being neglectful. He wants to make sure that she has not only a good time, but that he is there with her. But we know that things aren't perfect, kind of underneath the surface. And Sophie, 11-year-old Sophie, doesn't really see that at the moment, but as we see glimpses into adult Sophie and her kind of looking back, which is another brilliant thing about this film, is that it's really a memory. So everything we see may or may not have really happened.
Yeah, and alternatively, like, Sophie is not one note either. Like, while her father has kind of more going on than meets the eye, like, so does she. Callum encourages her to spend time with some of the younger girls at the resort. Oh, why don't you go play in the pool with those girls? She's like, no, those are babies. Like, I don't want to spend time with them. She wants to hang out with the older kids, right? Who are like playing pool or kissing in the bathroom, right? Like, and she wants to get older and grow up. And in that way, I think she wants to, try to have real human connections, which is part of the reason, like, her and her dad get along fine. But ultimately, like, there's a bit of a struggle sometimes, right? Because he thinks that she's maybe a little younger than she is, because that's the last time he saw her when he's been away, because mom are divorced. Maybe she just doesn't feel like she gets him. And then that, like, is juxtaposed really, really brilliantly again with, like, just these very, very brief, almost just like simply thematic flashes to the future. They're hardly even visual. Experimental almost, like when you see a Sophie looking back and trying to think, oh, hold on, let me try to revisit this space. It's really great. Like, it makes an 11-year-old girl like a surprisingly interesting character. Looking at the IMDb trivia, it says Charlotte Wells auditioned over 800 girls for the lead role of Sophie before settling on Frankie Coria. Wow. So it's well deserved. Yeah, like they worked at it. And also, I should say, nearly the whole film shot on location, which is amazing. Tons of outdoor work, tons of sunlight, lots of natural light. And what's so damn interesting about the way it's shot is there's a ton of shots that just linger for really long periods of time to let you think, right? Let's let you stew on what you're seeing, let you just kind of draw on the visuals. Sometimes even Sophie, which most of the film is told from her point of view, will kind of drift off in bed after a long day at the resort, and the camera will just kind of pan slowly over to Callum out on the balcony smoking a cigarette, or I don't know. I don't even really know what he's doing. And it's weird. It's this moment where you step out of, like, your you step out of where we're supposed to be, because for the most of the film we're following her, and every once in a while you just kind of get this peek at who this guy is, or maybe who she thinks he was, right? Like that's part of the interpretation of it. Makes it like, again, I don't know how they shot it, but boy, like it comes off just feeling so natural and human. Like it's really stellar.
Yeah, really great cinematography. There's an amazing shot where you can see Sophie in the reflection of the TV which is turned off, but also in the mirror that's in their hotel room. These kinds of shots, the experimental stuff that you kind of see in adult Sophie's timeline. It's just an incredible use of memory without explicitly being like a hazy flashback, because they have recorded footage, because Callum seems to be really interested in videotape recording, and this takes place in the 90s. I don't think we mentioned that. So he's got an old kind of VHS recorder, and he's recording some things. So we have live footage of things that did happen, but then there's a lot of like Sophie filling in the gaps, for better or for worse. And it seems like everything is always positive, and that's kind of how memory is. You kind of only remember the good things, and so it kind of calls into question some of the things that happened. Did they happen exactly how she remembers? Did they happen better? Did they happen worse? We don't really know, and there's no way to tell, but it's a fascinating look at how memory affects our emotions.
I think the best kind of art is the kind of stuff you can revisit months or even years later and come away feeling like totally different than you did the first time. And part of what makes Aftersun, I think, so interesting is that's exactly what it's kind of trying to be. It's interpretive, right? Based on your experiences with your parents and your experiences with how you read people. And you may read Paul Mescal as totally differently motivated than somebody else. Andy and I actually got together to watch this on, we watched Paramount with Showtime. That's where we saw it. Yeah, they've got it. I think any Showtime package will just, if you get Showtime on Hulu, I think they'll have Aftersun on there. They got to deal with A24. But about halfway through, I stopped to go to the bathroom and I said, hey, here's what I think is going on. And he was like, oh no, I think it's this. Two totally different reads on the same character, like crazy, I think it's fascinating, like how simple Aftersun is and just how effective it is. It is, again, lightning in a bottle. Not only do I think it's an incredible work by Charlotte Wells, I don't know if she could do it again. I'm gonna be honest. Like there's something really special here. Like it's really unique. So I'm really glad we got to talk about it. Any other thoughts, Andy, for recommendations?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention how one of the things that it sets up a lot of things that you think are going to kind of happen, or that would happen in a kind of coming of age film. And there is this constant sense of danger, which never really comes to fruition. I think a large part because as if you watch it as an adult, you know about all the dangers of people and strangers. Sophie runs in, she kind of hangs out with these older kids that are like 15, 16, that are like a little bit too old to be hanging out with her. There's a boy that likes her. They do this sequence of kind of some self-defense between her and her father, and like you were kind of waiting for really bad things to happen because as an adult you're aware of these, and child Sophie is not. But the movie doesn't make the mistake of just giving us a sad something or other to base some sort, it doesn't throw in a tragedy, which a lesser movie would have done, but it has that fear of that, as an adult, is always there. And I just thought that was a fascinating story element, that again, all these kind of dangers or possible dangers are hinted at but never really come to fruition.
Yeah, to underline the vulnerability of like a good coming of age story without exploiting it. It's a little like how I felt. It reminds me of like 8th grade, or even something like Thoroughbreds, like in a much more cynical fashion, like Thoroughbreds. But Thoroughbreds is rad. Y'all should go watch Thoroughbreds. But overall, I think it's a special feature, and I'm glad we watched it. Andy, would you recommend Aftersun?
Absolutely. I've been able to think of nothing else but this movie the last couple of days. It's really stuck with me. Really fascinating artistic film. Again, examining the a fond memory of a vacation with this girl's father and kind of what that means 10, 20 years afterwards. And, what was the man she remembered really the man he was? Was he more? Was he less? Just told in a really brilliant way. There's so many people who would have fumbled this. A studio would have thrown in some really, really unnecessary elements, but highly recommend.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Aftersun's super special. You should totally go see it. Like I said at the top, I don't want our review to dissuade you. If you're at all more interested, since we started talking about it, please go check it out. I don't think you'll be disappointed. If you're less interested, maybe give it a chance anyway, because maybe we did you a disservice. It's a difficult film to talk about because you don't want to. I don't know. You don't want to project what you think is going on into how other people will experience it, but keep an open mind and go in just kind of thinking of these two on vacation and kind of see where you end up, because just hopping on the internet and seeing what other people like have pieced together is fascinating, and seeing what people saw as, oh, well, I think this, and well, no, that this happens. I'm like, oh, man, that's kind of true. Like it makes this film interpretive in a way that like so many movies aren't nowadays, and that makes Aftersun a really special feature. Great work from Charlotte Wells. Cannot wait to see Paul Mescal again. Rock solid all around. And that's our show. God, that's our show for the week. Off script episode 228. Good Lord, Andy, we're flying through these things. What are we watching next week?
So we're going to be doing a streaming only weekend. There's not a lot of big releases. We're going to be taking a look at 2014's It Follows, which was kind of an indie horror hit from that year, starring Micah Monroe, about a curse that follows people around after doing certain things. One of my favorite kind of modern horror movies, almost 10 years old now. I can't believe it. Zach has never seen this, and that's part of the reason we're watching it. And I
Yes.
can always watch this movie. And it's it's like 90 minutes. It's quick. It's good. It's scary. So we're going to be taking a look at that. And also a look at Hulu's No One Will Save You, which is a straight-to-streaming small horror film starring Booksmart's Caitlin Dever, which we've heard a lot about. It's gotten attention from Guillermo del Toro and Stephen King. They've tweeted about it. So we're going to check that out, see what that's all about. That's available now on Twitter. And also just some FYI releases. The Exorcist Believer as I like to call it, comes out this Friday, October 6th, directed by David Gordon Green, a direct follow-up to the original Exorcist. We just could not get into this. It looks really, really bad.
What, Double Trouble? Yeah, not into that? No,
Yeah.
not into it. I'm excited to watch It Follows. I've always heard good things. I've seen memes. I just never got around to it. I'm also excited to watch No One Will Save You just because of the buzz. Good Lord. Like, we do a movie podcast and we didn't see this thing coming. So anytime something comes out and 8 directors hop on Twitter and go, oh my God, this movie's rad, we totally want to check it out. But most importantly, I'm excited to watch these movies because it's spook season, right? It's Halloween, baby, or at least it's coming up on it. 2 scary movies back to back. Perfect. It's my kind of podcast. It's going to be great. If you want to catch that episode 229, or any previous episodes we've done, you can find us on socials, right? We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on Twitter. We're on YouTube. We're posting full reviews. Insane things going on the YouTube channel. Got to go check out the YouTube channel. Please go check us out. Subscribe to us if you can. We're on all your usual podcast outlets, right? iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartMedia. You might even be listening to us from there right now. Also not Google Play, YouTube podcast, because they're changing the stuff around, but we'll be on it, and we'll be there when it changes, so don't you worry about us. You can check out our website, offscriptfilmreview.com, and you can email us any correspondence at mail@offscriptfilmreview.com. You can also leave a rating and review. Believe it or not, big help. Like the video, comment, ring the bell, all that good stuff. Whatever you can do to help you boys, we really appreciate it over here on Offscript Film Review. From all of us at Offscript, the home of bold cinema, I'm Zach Lewis.
And I'm Dr. Draper.
Thanks for watching.